Continuing with the 1998-2010 National Education Policy, all the industry units registered under the Factory Act would consider it mandatory to make the employees and their dependents literate. Now, there are two key features in this statement. All industry units registered under the Factory Act. In other words, if you had a registered industry and you were doing some sort of business, it was mandatory, compulsory. You were required by law to make sure not only your employees but their dependents. So you had two things to do. Number one was to make your employees literate. If they were not literate, you had to make them literate first and then make their dependents literate. Who are the dependents? If they were young people, it could be the parents, it could be spouses, it could be children. They were all dependents on this individual. How was a factory or a business or an industry supposed to do this? Where were they supposed to do it? You see, when you don't have guidelines, it becomes difficult to follow through. If the government was serious about the industries following through, they should have provided some space. Where were they supposed to get these employees? Where were they supposed to get the dependents of these employees together to make them literate, to teach them reading, writing, and simple quantitative skills? Simply telling them to do it was not good enough. Again, you see the factor of monitoring and accountability and supervision were missing. So maybe some factories or some industries did it, and most probably did not. Otherwise, our literacy numbers would change. Another useful resource available in the country in the form of Boy Scouts and Girl Guides can be effectively used in the expansion of literacy programs. Again, if you're familiar with Boy Scouts and Girl Guides, these are movements. The Boy Scouts obviously for boys, the Girl Guides obviously for the girls. And if you were a Boy Scout or a Girl Guide, you had to, by motto, be prepared, and you had to do a good turn, one good turn every day. What better way to do a good turn than to teach someone, to make someone literate? You see how Boy Scouts and Girl Guides could have been used. Maybe some were, most of them probably were not, because if one Boy Scout and one Girl Guide provided literacy training to even one other individual, our literacy number should double. But we saw in the previous table, they've never doubled. So this probably, again, did not happen. Again, simply because it looks good when you're told to do it, but who monitors whether it is being done? When monitoring is missing, when supervision is missing, when accountability is missing, people will not take the task seriously, because that's unfortunately been the culture within the country for a long time. Nobody takes implementation seriously. Implementation of any of these should be taken seriously. I think personally, Boy Scouts and Girl Guides are a rich source that the country can use to make other individuals literate, not just young, but even adults could be taught by Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. And hopefully, as I said, if one Boy Scout or one Girl Guide made one other individual literate, the numbers should just automatically double. The existing non-formal basic education community schools and centers would be increased to 82,000, including the existing 7,000. Now, do you see, this is wishful thinking. Of the 82,000 that were needed, only 7,000 existed. How were we creating 75,000 new non-formal basic education community schools or centers? How were they coming? Where were they coming from? Who was going to be responsible? Who was given the task to do all this? How was this to actually be implemented? To me, trying to bring up 75,000 new centers across the country is a daunting task. It is not an easy thing to do. And what was the status of the already existing 7,000 such centers? How good were they? If they were no good, if they were as bad as not being there, you're actually talking of starting 82,000 such centers. Starting, that's not good enough. That's only the beginning. Again, who was going to go and check, monitor, see what those centers were doing? Were those centers delivering? Were those centers churning out, producing literate individuals for Pakistani society?